So welcome to the AEC Hive podcast.
Thanks.
I'm Ralph Montague. I'm a director at ArcDocs. I'm joined today by John Egan, co-founder of AEC Hive from BIM Launcher. John, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm CEO of BIM Launcher. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this call. Been a big fan of Alberto for a while now, so let's see how this conversation goes.
Yeah, so we're very excited today to be joined by Alberto Tono from Deep Learning Italia. He's based in San Francisco, the heart of innovation. And Alberto, do you want to give us a brief introduction to yourself, your background, and what you're up to?
Well, I'm really flattered to be here with Ralph and John. Honestly, I'm a big fan of you as well. And what you guys are doing is pretty amazing for our industry. And for our industry, I want to point the fact that it's not only AC, but it's really the industry in general that desperately need a cross-pollination with the digital and humanities in a sort of way. And we as architects kind of embrace this vision of the collision of all this discipline in the unique figure of the architect. And it's kind of funny because here in San Francisco, they just finished to shoot Matrix 4, which is pretty incredible because all the Matrix movie had the main figure behind the scene of all these bits, 0 and 1, and it's basically the architect who, with the main machine, orchestrated the entire project. So I think the figure of architect in general need to be nobilitated as well. And probably technology can be the key for nobilitate this kind of discipline. And I've seen the same path also because I'm Italian has been done by the church. We as Italians are pretty attached by the church. And I have to say and to admit that the Pope is really engaged in this conversation. And I've been invited. This call it's called Renaissance. It happened the 28th of February. And basically Pope Francis hosted the vice president of IBM and Microsoft and the president of the FAO for this great white paper signature for ethics in AI. And I'm really a strong advocate of the ethical implication that we always should question when we think about technology and innovation. Really thank you again for this great opportunity. I'm really proud to be here today with you guys.
Yeah, great. And tell us a bit about Deep Learning Italia. What is it about?
Deep Learning Italia actually embedded a little bit the core values that we were talking about, education, sharing, research, also products, and has been established 3 years ago with a group of friends really passionate about statistics, neurobiology, and computer science in Italy. Personally, I had a great experience in China where I experienced in first place ethics and AI in computer vision for face detection and activity detection. So I was pretty engaged with the government there, had a really nice experience. And when I came back to Italy, I decided to start raising awareness about this technology and also the way they have been established. And so Deep Learning Italia is just a group of passionate professors, PhD researchers around Italy, and we are spreading all the deep learning, machine learning, and AI across different cities like Milan, Rome. And I would like to truly thank Matteo Testi. He's the main founder, actually, of Deep Learning Italia, and is always active and a strong advocate for this mission. I've been always engaged in this conversation, and I'm really proud of the work we have been doing.
And I mean, your experience as an architect and how you progressed from a career where you probably didn't think you were going to be so involved in technology. You probably thought you were going to be more involved in sort of bricks and mortar, physical things. And then, you come through an extensive career into generative design, computational design, technology. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so that's exactly the point. I think you envision the figure of architect, someone immersed with bricks and Malta, right, and concrete mainly. And it was never my idea of an architect. I thought always the architect put always at the center the people who live in the building, because at the end, the building is just a product of improving the performance, how people live, and how people can be happy and healthier in the space we all experience. So when I joined architecture, I just found I joined actually building, engineering, and architecture. And I was really debating because I was between also that time medicine, neuroscience, and engineering. I got admitted in all of this, but then I decided architecture because I thought to really embrace the main value that is behind, like we are building for people who are going to live there, and we are going to sort of shape the mind of the people who live in the city and in the building. And so it's a really strong responsibility, the one of the architect. And I thought that was the main value. But the turning point of my career was an exam that I took. And I was taking consideration of the landscape, the culture, the people who were living there. I was going to the building site and interviewing the community. And when I was doing the exam, the professor was really amazed at the work I did. And he told me, oh, you're going to be for sure a great architect. And I was like, well, I thought that I've done the normal job that every architect is supposed to do, to try to integrate the building in the site and talk with the people who are going to experience the building to understand their culture. And this was kind of scared me. And following all the lesson and the experience from the main architect, they were always talking about shapes, mathematics, the double curve, and the material, the bricks. They were never talking about people. And the main thing that they found in technology is all around people, like Facebook. Facebook has been done to connect people. Google has been done to search, to knowledge, to give knowledge to people. So all the main value behind technology company are actually focused on improving the life of people. The main mission that should always embrace an architect. And that's why I truly believe the mentality that and the value that are embedded in the software company are the value that I was looking forward in my career, in my life. And so that's why I kind of deciding to do this kind of career path, because I can definitely see division in conversation.
That's so true. I mean, architecture can get sort of obsessed by the artifact rather than the purpose, which is to give people places to do things. Let's talk a little bit about innovation. So the reason John and I started this AECI initiative was we had a general sense that the level of innovation and the level of research and development in the AEC sector was incredibly low. I mean, innovation does occur, obviously, but it typically occurs at the project level, you know, and when it occurs, it only occurs once on a particular project, and the learnings from that seldom get shared across, sometimes not even across one organization, but seldom get shared across the industry. You know, what's your feeling about innovation in the AEC sector? Do you feel there's enough innovation, or is it, you know, what's it like in San Francisco? Is there?
I would like to say probably the main question is why we are lacking of innovation in the AEC. So I don't see innovation happening in the AEC. I see a lot of change, but again, it's part of the mentality, it's part of the institution that has been created, and the value of the people in these organizations. That is my experience. And I want to make an example, like there are big organizations where you have to take exams, you have to take credits. And so there is not a natural spirit of innovation, of learning. So there are all these organized lunch and learn, mandatory lesson that you have to attend to commit your credit. Something that I would like to say is embedded in the software industry, because you always need to catch up with innovation, with the new software, to be faster, improving your product, as well as the main value. When I was a student and also when I was working in different companies, people felt really proud when they work extra hour or work in the weekend. And the main conversation also with other manager was like, oh, I made you this algorithm saving you 2 hours per day. And they were saying, yeah, but who cares? I can just let my people work 2 hours more and they got paid the same. So this sort of mentality that is not focused in efficiency, but is really focused on exploitation and try to always improve the design in an endless effort is really dangerous, in my personal opinion, to the industry, and is not allowing us to push forward. But also, I had to admit that we don't have a great example in the software industry applied to the AC. Also, the vision that other companies are providing to us, I wouldn't define really bright vision, especially if we think about generative design. I strongly recommend to see the article by Daniel Davis, was part of a conversation we had in New York. And we were just talking about how it's supposed to be generative design with these recommendation systems. And so we're having fun, like imagine to have an email where you type the text and then you have 2,000 options on how it should end up the sentence. It's like you have to spend time to look in your option and then click to your option. Right, Google, when you type, it gives you the best option, and then you can keep writing, typing, and it's going to change based on your behavior or attitude. And that, I think, should be the way generative design should go, a recommendation system. I'm really happy about the work that Hyper is doing, because they have, as a CTO, someone really knowledgeable about recommendation system. He used to work at Google and implement a recommendation function in order to suggest to the user the next function. And that's exactly a great example of how we should move forward. Recommendation system. No one is taking the time and taking care of them. And so why don't they suggest a different approach? So there is really a recommendation system in place that is present in all other industry and softwares. Mm-hmm. So that's a bipolar conversation that we don't have great examples in the software industry in the AC, but also at the same time, really old institution and old organization with different mentality.
John, you sort of sit on the outside of, you have a background in the AC sector, but then you went off into software development, and often in conversations we have, you're confounded by how crazy this industry is.
Okay, I find it, just to expand a bit on that, like, I think that Alberto, you and I have a lot in common. I started out life training as an architect, and I remember training in my class. I became fascinated with optimizing design for the purpose of, at the time it was very geared towards, crazy shapes, but I think that just reflected my immaturity with regards to what people really wanted in space. But from that, I went on to think about generative design. So I was quite fortunate. We had a guy called Christian Derrick from DAS Architects at the time, and he came in and he showed us how he was able to script the designs for buildings and generate buildings around the principles that he would embed within these scripts. And for me, I thought that this was fascinating because I could define the goal and then I could generate every possible permutation of a solution around that. And that's the way I kind of started thinking about buildings. I started thinking, okay, we as humans occupy buildings and we move around them, and we're trying to define these spaces within buildings according to their use cases. And I thought, no, that's not how we should be thinking about buildings. We should invert that, and we should be thinking about humans and their requirements at that moment, and the building should adapt around that person. Personally, what I did in response to the really strict conditions of passing the architecture degree, going through this kind of very fixed design process, I completely rejected that, and I identify that in your story as well, where you're saying your lesson in architecture school was that you started to design around the people, but and you're obviously drawing that similarity with technology companies. But I suppose what I did was I set up a society in the university and focused on emerging technologies and trying to explore ways with combining those with architecture. And from that, I set up, my own technology-focused BIM consultancy. And what happened to me in architecture school is I was actually thrown out of my degree, because I would not do what they wanted me to do in order to get the architecture tick the box exercise. So they failed me, and they said, look, do you want to either repeat the year, or you can actually go ahead and leave? And they were like, we don't care what you're trying to achieve here. We identify that you're doing innovative activities. We identify that you're traveling around Europe to conferences to receive knowledge from the leaders in generative design. But they were like, left me out on my own. So fortunately, I was working for an engineering company who had identified my skill set in generative design at the time, and they brought me on board, and I was able to exercise my skills there and grow them there. But I think what you're saying is think about and talk about hyper, and like what you're saying here about the recommendation system. I think, we're going to have, I suppose, like as you described it, like it's almost like bipolar. They're both pulling against each other, tech and AEC, because we're almost like our shared goals should be people, but really the shared goal for AEC is fee. And focusing on the inefficiencies that maximizes that, whereas tech is all about the people. And obviously, I suppose you've the flexibility of the business model around tech, but you don't have that in AEC. But I mean, like, we don't have a shared goal. If Hyper are recommending things to designers, what are those goals going to be? Are they going to be focused on fee? Are they going to continue to optimize for the inefficiencies that generate fee? Or how do you see that moving forward?
Yeah, thanks, John. I think you had a really great experience, and thank you so much for sharing. And I would say our path, and I'm sure there are so many other people who are sharing the same path, reading blog online, and also looking at the industry, is a common trend. And basically, one thing that emerged in the roundtable we had with all the CTO here in San Francisco was led by Roberto Tono, the CTO of Tono Tomasetti. And I'm sure they're doing a really great job also in terms of open source, sharing, providing hackathon, workshop, all these activities that our industry desperately needs. And exactly the main value is sharing, is the main value also behind the open source that I'm sure also you, John, are pretty close to. It doesn't mean that has to be free, of course, so you can charge for it. But the part that is open source can create community, can create conversation around, can create connection. And I'm right now in a great community that is PyTorch with Fast AI and Jeremy Howard here in San Francisco. And really be in the Silicon Valley put you way back in the future. That is kind of a weird way to say, way back in the future, but it's a future that is living also in the past in a sort of way, because we are eradicate in a world that is not there yet. And yesterday I went to the BART, that is kind of the subway we have here, and there was an advertisement was saying, oh, it's so 2019. So, and we are basically in February, March, so at the beginning of 2020, but it's this idea of progress, this idea of innovation that happened together. And hold the hackathon, there is one every weekend, and there are free lessons of deep learning basically everywhere, every day. Amazon provide that, AWS, Google, Microsoft, all these companies provide their space with food for free for communities. So really the ecosystem here is something amazing. Like immediately when I joined the Silicon Valley, I felt there was something here that is unique in the world. And I think it's this idea of sharing this ability to attract people with the same mindset, especially with other universities like Stanford and Berkeley. Really, they're really great people who love to push forward, who want to create a different leadership, eradicating human values in kindness, in humble. And so that's what I was lucky to see here. And I want to say it's not like every company in the Silicon Valley has that, for sure, or every person, but it's a common denominator that is present here. And that's, I hope, probably one of the main reasons why is doing so well. And hope it's going to do well in the future because they cancel all the conferences like GDC, Google I.O., Facebook F8. They cancel all these conferences for really major issue that is coronavirus. So I hope that can help us unite us all together as well.
Yeah, I mean, the picture I was having while you were talking there is, this, there's a beautiful library in Dublin at Trinity College, which has all these old books, of knowledge, like thousands of books. But all that knowledge is locked up in a piece of paper because, there's no way to access that knowledge unless you want to go and sit there and read every book. And, that was the thing about the AEC sector. Like the sector is actually incredible what it does in terms of building the built environment and building the world. And there's incredible knowledge within the sector, but it's locked up in people's minds. And the transfer of knowledge in the sector is or mostly through pieces of paper. And people have become sort of protective of their knowledge because maybe their position within a company or even the position of their company is well, in their minds, focused around the sort of knowledge or capacity they have within themselves. So I agree with you. There's no sort of sharing. Sometimes not even within organizations, people are quite protective about their knowledge and their position. And,
may I ask you a question about the library? Yeah. Like, how many books can you take from the library?
The library, and think about it, is really old books, so you can't actually take them out. You have to read them there.
Because here in San Francisco, I can take 50 books at a time, every time. 50. Yeah. And it's pretty insane. No other library that I've been, because I love to go to the library and study as much as possible. And San Francisco gave me the opportunity to have the latest book every year. And I can keep the book for almost 3 months. And I can keep like 50 books for almost 3 months. Is really.
But if you think about what Google's done in terms of, what's their motto? Something like organize the world's information. So they're digitizing and organizing information so that when you're looking for something, you can find it quickly.
And all the books are also PDF format. You can find all the books online. So because a lot of people don't like paper, but they love PDF, which I do too. You can also have all the books directly in PDF. So I think also the library is really the core place that I found for innovation because you can study for free. Like all my knowledge that I acquired in my career are basically all online, free, and I'm sure is a common denominator for everyone. But also all the other kind of group, the Dynamo user group, the Computational Design Institute that we found as a nonprofit and so on, also Deep Learning Italia, are all based on this free idea of education, free idea of learning. And that I strongly believe is a great values added in the educational system. But as well, the educational system is pretty outdated. The way we learn is so outdated, and especially in the university, you have a lesson which are not actually useful anymore because you can just Google it and find the main information for specialty topics. And there are such great lectures also online. So the university should be a gather for students to work together and create teams and sharing opinion and working together. So that's probably the best value that I've seen here also in the San Francisco University. They have this data institute where there are people who are flying here from all over the world for 2 months to work together in a deep learning project. And they were able to reach state-of-the-art algorithm that compete against IBM, Google, and Facebook for the deep learning part. And just because they gather all these passionate people, like usually are also researchers or students, here working together like group of 10, 12 people, like a super hackathon of 2 months, but with the professor, with the supervisor, and really they provide some of the best algorithms that are out there, like the Oldify, the one that produced color out of the black and white pictures, was produced here, and so many others. So, and I was amazing, like this, Jeremy Howard created this company, it's called Fast AI, is a high-level API system framework built on top of PyTorch mainly. And he was showing some of the paper he produced, basically with the same line of codes, like 5 lines, he was able to reproduce a mathematical formula with 5 lines. And he was presenting this at Google, and it was so fascinating because now you can start translating maths into code and kind of understanding in a better way. And in the same we could do also in architecture. So many problems that we are facing, as well as John was mentioning before, are optimization problems that other industry already solved back in days, but because there is not this cross-pollination conversation between other industry, we are pretty lacking behind. And I think the main engine should be how we as an industry can attract other people to join us, because I'm seeing all these talents are leaving the AC and going software company, and John is another great example of this brilliant mind, really focused on innovation, focused on great values, but has to leave the industry because it was not the right place for him, especially in his education, in his university. And I think every one of us is fat like John, I would like to say, in one point on the career. But so how we can have this talent back in the AC? That is the main question. How can we make AC cool again or uncool again in a sort of way?
Yeah. It's interesting because, well, I was at a function last week, but we were discussing the construction sector, and as we went around the room, about half the room said, well, I'm not really part of the construction sector. And then we started discussing, well, actually everyone in the room is engaged with the built environment. Like that's where you live, it's where you work, it's where your children go to school. Like there's very little about your life that doesn't involve the built environment, and yet half the people in the room felt they had no engagement or no role in the sector. So one of the things is that a lot of people feel disconnected. So they kind of have to deal with the built environment every day, but they feel they have no control or position on how it's shaped, or so you just have to deal with what you get effectively, which is quite terrible if you think about it. Sorry,
but
John?
I think, I completely agree. When I got thrown out of architecture school, my parents said, "Oh, John, I thought you wanted to be an architect." And I said, "I do, but I don't want to be their version of an architect. I want to be my version of an architect." And I think, quite rightly so, people are saying, we don't feel part of the construction industry, but it's just because they don't have a place in this ivory tower of that, I suppose, like restrictions that have been built up to actually engage in anything meaningful to do with the industry. And I suppose that's just, it's kind of protected by.
Yeah, it's amazing to live sort of behind the scene, because I can see this kind of battle between architecture and engineering company and construction company in a sort of way. Like I'm seeing this division between AE and the C. There are basically also software company like Autodesk is moving mainly in a construction focus view, as well they establish in BIM 360 and all the new purchase they had were mainly focused on construction. And also the main conversation happening with Stanford are also focused on construction, and Martin Fisher is another great example of that. The other flip of the coin, or part of the coin, is like Danny Sheldon from Georgia Tech, who the successor of Zach Eastman, one of the main people behind building information modeling. They are more focused on architecture, engineering, and they felt left out from this conversation, especially with Autodesk, and they're moving with software like more Rhino, Grasshopper. And so there is this kind of division that's happening in the industry that I'm seeing. But then the only people are taking advantage are software company who are actually founding really great event, hackathon, especially for the industry, and they are trying to tackle the main issue. Like Flux was the spin-off from Google X. So as all of us know, Google X is the spin-off from Alphabet, from Google. And that's where all these conversations are happening mainly from this company that I've seen, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, IBM, and also Disney. They are really engaging, especially thinking about the Omniverse, is an NVIDIA platform that is taking advantage of Pixar USD, Universal Scene Description, is a virtual environment that is supposed to have this kind of real-time collaboration, and it's pretty brilliant. It's still an alpha. They are supposed to release at the end of this month. But again, is a software company, is NVIDIA, who's taking the leap and actually try to improve. At the same time, there is Apple, who is producing USD-Z, and then there is Autodesk also wrapping up around the USD. But the essence is Pixar and all these other software companies that are actually trying to build the main pipeline for our industry. But again, our software company who are also driving this, and I'm pretty sure as soon as they're gonna be the chance, they're gonna take the market in a really eradicate way, and they are building pretty good and solid relationship with all these companies. So I have a lot of friends who are doing also BIM, especially Apple, Google, and they're way ahead of other really good company in the AC.
Yeah. And do you think that's because of a general frustration of the AC sector is just struggling to deliver? You know, like even in Ireland, like we would sort of consider ourselves a first world country, but we can't deliver enough housing here, we can't deliver enough schools, we can't deliver enough, you know, healthcare facilities to meet the needs of the people in Ireland. And that's not even considering the rest of the world. So, yeah, I think when it comes to the need for innovation, I think there's a general frustration amongst everybody that construction's too slow and it's too expensive and it's just not meeting people's needs. And back to your earlier point, and then there's quite a few people in the AEC sector who are not thinking about people, and they're thinking about designing award-winning artifacts, you know, rather than delivering needs.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm seeing, especially based on my experience, there are all these architecture company or other company that are trying to do really great marketing video, how they're helping other population and country, providing their solution in the design for shelter, disaster relief. But as far as I've seen, this is only marketing, just to attract interest and funding and to put we are doing something good for other people. But then when you are actually trying to help them and try to push to say, okay, let's do it, you have no conversation. So it's really, there is a big bubble of marketing and a lot of fake news that, at least for me, when the bubble explodes and you realize there is nothing behind, it's pretty upsetting. So that was one of the saddest things that I have to admit I've seen, especially in the AC. A lot of really great company, really big firm that are supposed to be a reference for us, just pushing out a lot of fake news, a lot of misleading videos, and that was pretty devastating for my values, especially.
And this idea of sharing information and sharing algorithms and sharing, you've participated in many initiatives, hackathons and the San Francisco Computational Design Institute, and so you've been in many environments where people come together and are willing and open to share. And I sort of listened into your event at AU about hackathons, and you had some great people on the panel. What in general is that I would think that for most people in the AEC sector, the idea of sharing information is quite foreign. And the opposite is true. We should keep all our information to ourselves and keep our. Do you see a change in the way people are thinking about opening up and?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think thanks to great example, they basically opened the door to us, to this kind of conversation. Thanks to them, and I really would like to thank Robert, Ian, Dimitri also with Speckle, Ladybug with Mustafa, Theo and Chris, all these amazing heroes in our industry. They are giving the great example of how we should all behave and work together. And like Speckle is creating an amazing community also there. And this open source and this sharing help a lot to create a community. And that's what also Autodesk realize is needed. And Rachel Hartley and from Autodesk community, Autodesk finally give a lot of funds for this initiative to start building communities, funds, and we are, as the San Francisco Computational Design Institute, was mainly founded by Autodesk nowadays, especially the next event we're going to have a Microsoft with Peter from MBBJ about computer vision and machine learning in architecture is funded for the food part by Autodesk and also hosted by Microsoft. And a lot of the participants actually are not in the AC, are mainly for software companies, which is interesting. But they have also background of architecture, but they work now in software. I think this can help in reintegrate them in our field and start another conversation. And a lot of startups raising up. DPR as an amazing venture capital ecosystem. I can see, especially here, there are a lot of spin-off startup that are raising. Airbnb has a great team that is doing an amazing job, and so on and so forth. Yeah, sharing is going to be the key part in our industry. Not only about coding, but I saw people start sharing details, construction details, library for free, and it's a common paradigm that is getting there. But it has to happen also in a university level. Like students, the main thing that I saw also in the university was just this. I was the only one to share my notes. I was an excellent student. I was always in the first line. I had the best mark in the university, best scores. But I was the only one who was willing always to share my notes. And at that time, I was training for water polo 6 hours per day, and I was also playing with the national team. So it was really hard to keep up, do really well in university while I was training 6 hours per day in water polo and do work as a waiters and barman also in the weekend. But the fact that I felt happy because I can share my knowledge, I can share my notes, I can share something with others and make their life better and easier. And so this helped me to be also the representative of my university at that time. The student will elect me as the main representative. And now I also founded another nonprofit that help to give back I raised $20,000 to help students to come here in the Silicon Valley and vice versa. It's called Alumni of the University of Padua. And we are starting to get some programs, some students. So this kind of give back is really important and has to happen in real time. What I've seen from other generation, they wait an entire life, they take all the advantage they can, exploiting people, and then at the end, okay, I'm going to give back to others. What has to happen is the same mentality of software. You have to commit right away, pull request. The innovation has to happen really quick. And so your give back has to happen immediately. And the same thing we are hoping in this program is going to be called commit back, actually to help the open source project to raise their awareness, to start be sharing and improved by all the community.
The way that I see construction is this big monolith of everyone from government, construction to the small architect, and it's almost created its own ecosystem that is, has its own economics, and like innovation, like I said before, is happens around. It's not almost intuitive like tech would be, like i.e. make people's lives easier. It's focused on like the inefficiencies and the fees, and that's what makes money. Now, I've had quite a lot of experience with software vendors in this industry, and like, this idea of sharing just doesn't work with them. It's all about building this platform beast that everything is centralized in their platform, and unless you're in their ecosystem, they don't want to know about you. And they're also woven into this this ecosystem of self-made economics, etc., that I mentioned before. And I find that there's a wall garden there. And what we're doing on one side of the wall garden is talking about sharing and building solutions like we see in the tech industry. But there's no correlation with this on what's happened on the other side of this wall, which is this ecosystem. And I find, as leader of BIM Launcher, who started up, like, this is my third tech company. My second one was an open source company, completely open source. We built a platform of microservices that would enable people to reuse these microservices to really quickly build construction applications. And we wanted to make it a not-for-profit, and it was, great. It followed all these really nice ideas and principles that were born in the tech industry. Now, it failed.
But the point is this. So the company who are actually doing open source are the richest company in the world. Like Microsoft bought GitHub for several $1 billion, and Facebook is doing open source, but they can do open source. They can have people who can share. So the point is that you need to be really strong, and then you need to give the example that you can share. But if you're not strong, you cannot share. But those great people and great company have to give the example. So they have to put at least 2 of their employers to work on open source. And that's what company like Arup is doing. Dimitri is sponsored to keep working open source. HOK was doing with Conrad the mission control. So Woods and Pagot also is helping. Another company that are pretty solid, Torre Tomasetti, another great example. So great company are giving the example. So I strongly believe that there has to be an hybrid ecosystem that doesn't have to be all open source, all free. I don't believe in that. I believe the beauty of this world is amazing because there is different culture, different mentality, and different people. And so I think we should all respect the fact that we want some magic. We want some exclusive. We want some, this sensation are part of the surprise, right? Because if something happens in your company, people want to join your company to see the magic that is behind your company. And so this sense of magic, I think, is part of the main spirit of innovation, like Facebook. You can see everything, but it's really difficult. Like I went to a really hard interview process, and it took like several months, and you have to spend 1 month and a half just to study a book that they provide to you. But then, especially when you join this company, is an entire magic that you can see and you can experience. So for sure, Facebook released PyTorch, Google released TensorFlow, open source, free to use. They provide services, create a community around. But then they are the best company in the world in terms of money. So for sure, you need to be an efficient company that making a lot of money. The problem is like all these companies are actually not efficient, and I wouldn't say they're making a lot of money, because if they will make a lot of money, they would as well have money to provide these kind of services back to the community. They don't have even money to support open source project. Like even Ladybug, how many companies are giving $5 to Ladybug? And it's amazing software. I mean, the only thing of Ladybug people can say is the EPW file that are pretty outdated. And Ashrae actually did a Kaggle competition for several $1,000s to actually have a better prediction system, time series forecasting on that field. So I really would like to say that it's important that we keep in mind this hybrid system and focus on, for sure, in fee, money. You need to have a cash flow, but the main value that is always behind everything, I think, is the happiness. People want to be happy. I mean, if the happiness is behind a fee, I don't think it's the real value there. People invest in Zaha and Foster because they were giving dreams. They were giving a beautiful building. They were giving the experience, the exclusiveness to work with them, to work with these great artists, mathematicians, extraordinary people who were dreamers, for sure, innovators, but I'm sure they were making their relationships great, and they were making their client happy, surprising them. So
that's, I suppose, one of the things about the AEC sector is there's such a small percentage of companies like you've described, where the majority of people who operate in the AEC sector are working in very small and disparate and disconnected companies, and not working, like, so the Arabs and the HOKs and the Zahas and Fosters, there's a very small percentage of companies and a small percentage of people working in those types of big organizations.
True, and it's only the 1%. And
and even the amount of buildings that get produced through that system is quite small as well. So I think it's less than 5% of buildings are actually designed by architects. So so I think that's, and this idea of like small companies that are struggling to keep going, and for them to invest in open source projects or community things,
I mean, it's
quite difficult. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm not agree.
No? Okay.
So there is an amazing lab here at Berkeley. It's called XR Lab. And I'm in a conversation with an amazing postdoc and also other PhD. They are actually giving the main research that, as you stated, 1% of this firm are there, but then they are focused on the 99% of the other company. And so there are also products, for example, SketchUp, that are really inexpensive, but also open source project that can be used, like Blender. It's free, it's open source. You can use it. If architects are going to start using it, then they don't have to implement, but just providing feedback. Using it is free. They can afford it because it's also free, and there is no expense. They can deliver the product, and they can. We need the user. We need the people who actually are trying, are working on that and giving feedback. So those, and the 99% of the company, are the people who are actually pushing the real innovation, because all the software, as you the beauty of Google is because it's for everyone, not because it's accessible for like 2-3 companies. And so the beauty of the software like Blender is because it's affordable, it's free, it's open source. And so definitely a small architecture studio are the one actually using Blender. I haven't seen anyone in my previous company using Blender, maybe one that is really good expert of Blender, but no one even was allowed to install Blender. So other small architecture firm, they install Blender and it's open source. There is Blender Beam, it's a great product, it's been developed. You have also amazing deep learning part design in Blender, and they're really great engineer working on that.
Personally, anyway, I see open and closed source software in construction in the AC sector like oil and water. It's just not going to mix. Now, I see what, like from your perspective, you know, you're saying, look, there's all these great examples. We need to push through. And from my perspective, I can see hopefully we'll get something to benefit the industry out the other side. Now, the reason that I kind of have these views is that, like, you know, all the products that you've discussed, like Speckle, they're all at their, very much so in their genesis stage of their life cycle. It's arguable whether they'll reach product, and certainly arguable whether they'll reach commodity, because they don't have the business model. So they're not propped up by, I suppose, the likes of the public stock market, for instance. And what I'm seeing is that these companies might fail, and therefore it's risky for other the masses to actually invest in. And to come back to your point about looking at like tech companies, for instance, Google, yes, you've identified that the biggest companies are open source companies, but like I've observed the growth of the Kubernetes platform. So that's you know, for anyone that doesn't know, that's the open source equivalent of the software that Google used to run all of their applications. So your Google apps, such as Docs, Sheets, etc., across their data centers at scale. And they're even looking at their business model now. So since, you know, Google Cloud Platform a couple of months back, their CEO came out and said, look, we made a mistake with we think we made a mistake with Kubernetes. And therefore, this other networking tool that they have open sourced at the moment, they're not considering making that part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which is this open initiative where nurtures these open source projects. And he's saying, no, maybe what we're going to do now is keep this open source so we can control and govern this project, but it's not going to be allowed into this open environment where anything can happen. So there's so much happening right now, and we have product in BIM Launcher that I really want to open source, and I really want to give, and I really want to kind of support the construction industry. But like as I look at this, so we have a container platform that I'd love to open source, but as I look towards the other big vendors like your group, your A-Site, your Group BC, your Trimble, your BIM 360, none of these guys are engaging in the giving back. None of them want to connect with one another. They exist within their walled gardens. They have their market, and to my mind, I can't see a strategy for the shared and open source model at this moment. And I feel pretty defeated by the outlook on things. And as a result, I'm keeping BIM Launcher and our products closed source. And that's my current mode of thought, but I'd be interested to receive your feedback and advice based on your experience and kind of like your forecast on the way that the construction industry is moving.
So I think the bad part for me is like I don't have the experience of this industry for so many years. But also the good part of me is like I don't have that experience. So I'm kind of fresh, and I feel I still have the energy. I'm not drained. and I'm still capable to push forward and do my part, as you guys probably already did, and it's like, as you were mentioning, a kind of drain, because it's so frustrating to hit in the wall for so many times and we want to have this kind of culture because we feel they're gonna exist better conversation. We can really improve the build environment. We can really improve the place where we live, and moving forward, and really improving, and not stopping each other and competing against each other, but in a bad way, but just competing for innovation. So, and that's happening also, I would like to say, internally at Google. There are different teams who are building the same product. They don't talk with each other, and they basically invest million of dollars in this kind of team of 10 top PhD students and researcher that are building the same product. Another team in another place in the world inside Google is building, and then they have to demolish one of them. So even Google has the same problem internally, because as you can imagine, there are this giant company, and the communication and the collaboration is really hard problem in every organization, in every company. So my biggest hope is from the government. Be Italian, we have a government that forces us to push innovation. Like Paolo Pisano also was part of this conversation with the Pope, and happened last week. And we made mandatory BIM. There are a lot of regulation. Italy is a country full of regulations, and as you can say, the best country where BIM is happening as a revolution are Northern Europe country like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, because I think the government is really engaging in this conversation and is really connected with the companies, and is part of the conversation. So I can see also from one of my great friends, Marzia Bulpagni, she's also really engaged with European commitment and different conversation. And those are the people who actually can do something that can really impact our industry, in my personal view.
That's fascinating. I think so. And I know you're feeling defeated, John, but look, I'm just thinking a couple of years back, even Microsoft and Google and, they were quite closed organizations themselves. And it was only a couple of years ago that Microsoft started having this sort of let's open up and let's invite people to
the new CEO. Just revolutionize everything. Even now we are talking with Teams. Honestly, I always thought Slack was the best platform, but then I tried Teams and it's amazing. Now IBM is making a huge scale. They're using Slack internally, but honestly, Teams, especially for something like us, this visual, need the 3D environment, need the collaboration, it's pretty amazing. It's a really great platform. Also, they release Visual Studio Code, this open source, GitHub, the both LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is amazing also for learning, connecting with the people in the work ecosystem. So I would say the main action that this company took are pretty remarkable, and they are giving the example that it's going to take probably other 20 years for our industry to learn, but
maybe not. Maybe if we have our way, one of the reasons we've started this AEC Hive is to have these conversations. Like, this has been a fantastic conversation. We could probably talk for hours. I don't want to keep you too long, but just to connect people around the world who are pushing for better ways of doing things, challenging the status quo, maybe questioning whether the ways we did things 20 years ago are still relevant. Maybe there's better ways of doing things. I think what the AEC sector does is incredibly important, not only to the AEC sector, but to everybody. So it's creating the built environment, and we've got to do that in a much better way, in a much more sustainable way. And we've got to reduce the time and cost of delivery. We've got to improve the quality of those environments. So there's lots of challenges to deal with, lots of innovation needed.
Yeah, we're really the main responsible of all the climate change, CO2 emission. Yeah.
And lots of these conversations and connecting the dots, and it's only because of technologies. The reason we're talking today is because of LinkedIn. We've never met in person, but we've created relationships through technologies, which is fascinating. And look forward to meeting in person one day.
Yeah, look at the magic. I mean, sometimes we never stop to think what's happening behind the scene, but really now my voice is traveling all around the world in real time and arriving to you. I don't know, I'm really focused on quantum in the last days, and there is this teleportation on quantum level that is really fascinating to see where we are going. And even this, we don't realize because now it's granted in especially in my life, but having the information that can talk and I can arrive to you in real time is pretty remarkable. And I still don't understand how it's happening. It's magic. Just, it's free. I haven't paid for that. So I don't know. It's the beauty of this world.
Yeah, thanks very much. We greatly appreciate your time and all your insights, and it's incredible.
It's incredible what you guys are doing. You're giving a lot of lessons also to us how to have a great impact, and definitely you're a great example, at least for me. I've been following since the beginning, and I hope you're gonna keep doing what you're doing for long. I think it's gonna be hard, but let me know what we can do to help you as well.
Very good. Well, thank you, Alberto, for your time. One thing that I'm going to take away from today is that innovation happens together, and I know you're the other side of the planet. But
no, innovation happens only in the Silicon Valley. No.
You haven't been Thailand yet.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Hope you keep well, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rob.